Hey guys, I'm Jameson with Rogue Engineer, and today I'm gonna be going over 12 tips and tricks that are gonna make you a better and more efficient woodworker. Tip number one is a 1.5 inch rigid foam insulation board that is 4 feet by 8 feet wide is the perfect sacrificial board to be able to break down full sheets of plywood. This is gonna give you something that is going to fully support that full sheet of plywood as well as act as that sacrificial board below, so you set the depth of your circular saw just deeper than the plywood itself, and then you can cut right through the plywood. And as you can see, I have a ton of cuts and I've got a ton of use out of this board already. Tip number two is using stop blocks or marks. Now, when you're cutting or making a lot of repetitive cuts on a miter saw, something like a scrap piece of wood can act as your stop block. You can clamp it down to, if you have an extension to the work surface of the miter saw, you can actually even clamp it to the miter saw itself for smaller cuts. Or if you don't have that, you can just take a simple pencil and mark a line on the deck of your miter saw and then move your piece right up to that line to be able to make that repetitive cut accurately every time. Now, tip number three is related to the brad nailer. And when you're fastening two pieces of wood together, usually you're working with a smaller space that you have to put a nail in, and sometimes those nails want to squirt out the side. Now, the reason for that is the nail will go side to side. It will rarely ever will it go forward and backward when it's coming out of here. So if you're nailing like this, most of the time, if that nail deflects, it's gonna go side to side. Whereas if you nail like this, which most people want to, sometimes that nail is gonna wanna pop out the side. So when you're using that brad nailer next time, make sure that you always go side to side and never straight up and down. Tip number four is gonna be how to draw a perfect circle. Now, there's a lot of different ways to do this. However, I've found one of the easier ways and less damaging to the wood as far as putting multiple holes in the wood or that nail in the center of the board is to use a piece of paper. And what I do is I take a ruler and I measure out the radius of my circle and I make two marks, one at the center and one at the outside of the circle. So for this one, we're gonna go with a 4-inch radius or an 8-inch diameter circle. So I've got the two marks there, and now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my pencil and I'm just gonna poke a hole through that paper at each mark. So we've got two holes there. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put one pencil in the one hole and one pencil in the other hole. And then I am going to rotate about the one pencil and make that perfect circle with no damage to the board. We can go ahead and cut that circle out with a jigsaw or a bandsaw and move on to the next step. Tip number five is going to be preventing tear out. Now, one easy way to do that is to lay down a strip of painter's tape where you're gonna be making your cut. That is going to provide some support to the top edge of that wood and prevent that tear out. So right now, I'm gonna show you a cut with no painter's tape and then one with, and you'll see the difference. So as you can see here, we've definitely got some tear out along that line, whereas this one, we've kind of minimized it by adding that painter's tape. Now, another way to prevent tear out is to upgrade your blade. You can easily do that with a new Diablo blade. Diablo is my preferred brand, especially for circular saws. They have a variety of saw blades, and the more teeth, the better or finer the cut is gonna be, the less tear out you're gonna have. However, the slower the cut is gonna be. So you'll see less teeth commonly on a circular saw because they're trying to get a faster rip cut versus a finer or a higher tooth blade, which is gonna give you a nice clean cut. Tip number 6 is going to be centering a pilot hole. Now, oftentimes with hinges and things like that you need to be precise on where that screw is going to be located, you need to drill a pilot hole, and that pilot hole needs to be in the exact center of that the hole on that hinge. So they've come up with a bit that is called a self-centering pilot hole bit, and these are designed for different size hinges or hinge holes and so on and so forth. So you can get these in different sizes. But the nice thing is there's a guide with a spring, so you can place that in the hole that is going to align that drill bit in the center of the hole for the perfect pilot hole. Tip number 7 is super simple. It's just a simple magnetic clip or a stick-on clip or whatever kind of clip fits to your surface that's nearby your saws. So I use magnetic clip because I've got metal cabinets that I can magnetize this to, and that is going to hold my cut list while I'm making my cuts. That's gonna get it up and out of the way, off my work surface so it doesn't get covered up with material. I use this all the time. I've got one over my miter saw, one by my table saw, and I've even got one on a cabinet down by the ground where I make most of my plywood cuts. Tip number 8 is going to be finding angles. Now, finding angles when you're laying trim into a corner can be tough because what you think might be a 90 degree corner might actually be an 87 or a 92 degree corner. And when you make those cuts, you're gonna have a noticeable gap in your trim. So what I like to use is a simple angle finder. You can get these in plastic, and they're very inexpensive, but that will tell you not only the wall angle, which you can cut in half to get your miter angle, it'll also give you the spring angle for things like crown molding. Or if you want to upgrade, you can get a digital one with a display on it that will give it down to the 1/10 of a degree, which is really great for fine tuning that trim. Tip number 9 is using a speed square to find those angles. If you don't have a miter saw available, you might need a speed square in order to find a particular angle. Now, a speed square has a ton of capabilities that most people don't know. I'm not gonna go over all that right now, but what I am gonna go over is, for one, you've got your 90 degree cut, you've got your 45 degree cut, and then you can roll this over and find whatever angle you need right here along this diagonal edge, and that's gonna give you that cut right there. Tip number 10 is going to be rolling your miters. Sometimes you need to miter 2 pieces of wood together into two 45s and mate those together for a 90 degree angle. And what happens is those miters don't always turn out perfectly. Sometimes you end up with a little bit of gap, or you've got one side overlapping the other. Nevertheless, the way to easily fix that problem is with something as simple as a pencil, or I've got a little round metal bit, and you can take that corner, see the imperfections down here in that corner, and you can take this bit and just simply roll over that miter, and it makes that blend in nicely. Tip number 11, or tool rather, I guess you could call it a tool, is the glue bot. Now, a typical bottle of glue is stored upright with the tip at the top like this, and the glue gets all messy around there, and you gotta make sure it's sealed up at the end of the day. But when you dispense the glue, you need to turn the bottle upside down like that. Whereas with the glue bot, which I have had this one for years and years, you can dispense it just like that. Just by squeezing the bottle, it forces the glue up this tube and out the end, so you can get into those tighter spots and put that glue on without having to rotate that bottle. Then all the glue settles back in. You can cap it if you wish. My cap's been long gone for years and I haven't had a problem with it. Occasionally you will have to pull some of the glue out, but like I said, this one has been on my shelf for years and I wouldn't switch to any other bottle of glue. Last but not least, tip number 12 is how to improve your sawhorse's capabilities. So normally you've got 2 sawhorses, you got to put a piece of wood that you need to cut, but say you need to cut across this way. Well, I guess I could slide my sawhorses in, I can cut it like that, whatnot. However, if you've ever noticed, on the top of sawhorses are these 2 notches. The reason for those notches are for these 2x4s. Now you can imagine with a full 2x4, you can get quite the work surface. And now you've got all kinds of adjustability. It even stiffens up your sawhorses so they aren't gonna tip over during those cuts, and just makes for a nicer work surface when you're working on the job site or just outside. So those were 12 of my favorite tips and tricks to make you a more efficient and accurate woodworker. Now, if you've got some cool tips, make sure you leave those in the comments. Until next time, be safe and happy building.